Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Rachel.
Hello.
And Mackenzie.
Hi.
And Alex.
Hey.
Hey, Alex. I'd like to welcome you all to this episode, which should be, it's maybe a tough topic, but it's not a fun topic, I guess. It's a tragic conversation in some ways. You'd have to almost be under a rock to not know this at this point, but I'm going to let you know, Kobe Bryant passed. I hope I'm not the first one to tell you that. And that's what we're talking about today. It was Sunday, a tragic helicopter accident that not only took his life, but his daughter's life, and also 7 other passengers, which included, friends of his daughters and their parents, obviously the pilot. And, it's one of those things that we decided to talk about just as the culture is kind of grieving in a whole, and we wanted to just look at that and see what it is about celebrity deaths that sometimes just seems so different, the way everyone reacts to it. Also talk a little bit about the TMZ culture around it, how they want to be first to report things, and a lot of times it's inaccurate, and in this case it was inaccurate, and how that can be hurtful. So without any further ado, let's just kind of jump into this topic. First, let's just kind of familiarize everyone with what our connection was to Kobe Bryant, because I think people listening are probably all across the board. Maybe they're super fans, or maybe they just knew him as that basketball player. And I think all of us are kind of in the same shoes here. So I'll start with Rachel.
Yeah. I think I knew he was a professional basketball player that played for the Lakers. And I just knew that he was more than just the basketball. Like, he was into other things more than just the basketball thing, and people really loved him. And but other than that, I'm not like a big basketball fan, so I wasn't like following him, or wasn't like, and I don't know basketball well enough to even know how good he is even. And so
he was good.
Yeah. I don't know. But yeah, so that's pretty much all I know about him. But I did know of him. So
Mackenzie.
I knew he was a basketball player, and that's about it. Okay. So I am probably the least in the know, except for the things my husband has told me in the past couple of days. So I'm just going to pass it to Alice.
Alice, yeah.
Alex.
Oh, I thought you said Alice.
It's all right.
Just pass the ball to Alice.
It's not like I've never been called that before, okay? And so, yeah, I love basketball, before hashtag ball is life was cool.
Yeah.
Hashtag symbol.
Okay.
I was a gym rat, and so you watch people that play basketball, and there's some people that just transcend and probably are, generationally like one of the GOATs, one of the greatest. And so, growing up as a young lad, it was Michael Jordan, and then I feel like the baton was passed to Kobe Bryant from Michael Jordan. So MJ in the 90s. And then the 2000s, I think, were kind of ruled by Kobe Bryant, won 5 NBA championships. Inside of that, he, had a lot of stuff against the Spurs, and there was a lot of epic battles I remember watching, and really sucked me into being an LA fan, moving from the Bulls to LA just because watching him was amazing. He had big accomplishments, 81-point game. He shot 2 free throws and made them on a ruptured Achilles tendon in a game. He scored 60 in his final game, ended up being the 3rd leading scorer in the NBA history. And so he was just one of those people that was a once in a generation type of player. And so for me, it was always fun to watch him play. And I'm coaching my son's team now, and it's fun to there's a song by Lil Wayne. It's one of his not bad, really bad songs that is called Kobe Bryant.
Not explicit.
So it was one of those songs, like literally in college as I played, and overseas a bit, listened to, and it was my pump up song, you know, and so I've passed that on to my son over this season. So that's been fun. I like Kobe.
Okay, good. There. Yeah, I think for me it was like in high school, playing street ball, but not. It was in South Dakota, so it wasn't really like Philadelphia street ball or something. No, but it was one of those things where you'd go out and play with your friends, and like Kobe and Shaq were like the dream team, like you just idolized them. Like I would always play as Kobe whenever I played a basketball video game. Like that was, just the thing you did.
But on the streets, you played as Shaq, right?
On the streets, though, yeah, that was like, me and my buddy, like he was Kobe. I had the Shaq jersey.
Got it.
It's because I was taller, not nearly as good. But yeah, it's just one of those things where like, yeah, I would say now, like I haven't thought about Kobe for years, but it was just then, and man, I started to say 20 years ago, and that's actually accurate, so that's scary for me. Yeah, that's like the last time I'd really thought about Kobe that much. But yeah, I think he was like one of my heroes as a high schooler. So I think that's kind of why this makes it big news in a lot of ways, or bigger news than some. I mean, there are celebrity deaths happen a lot, and you see people react to it on social media, through the news media, but some of them just seem bigger than others, and I think this is definitely one of those. What are some of the things that you think made this one specifically so big? Why do you think people everywhere just kind of reacted to it the way they did? I mean, I think part of it has to be the tragedy around it, right? It's not just because of his basketball career.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think whenever I first heard it, I think it was like a little bit different because he wasn't just like old, so you expected, he's an older celebrity, and or it wasn't like something like suicide, or it was just so different than most celebrity deaths that you hear about, and so I think that's why it hit a little bit differently, because you're like, oh my goodness, like that was just tragic, like you couldn't expect that at all. So it was a little different when I heard about it.
Yeah. To me, I think a big part of it was even timing, so like Rachel said, I mean, the guy's 41 years old. He's starting really his next career, as a retired NBA athlete. And so young guy, he's got kids. He just had a kid in July, his last daughter. And so, but literally the night before, he was kind of all over the news because LeBron James had passed him on the scoring list. And so LeBron had tweeted at him. He had tweeted back at LeBron to carry the torch. And so there felt like poetic parts of it. And I remember like reading, R.I.P. Kobe on Twitter like right away on Sunday as I got home from church, and my first thoughts were like, oh, people are just taking jabs, like LeBron is now like Kobe's career doesn't matter. Yeah. And then I look at it more and I'm like, no, the guy actually died. Yeah. And so then I'm like, what? Like, how did this happen? And my first thoughts went to, please don't tell me like it was suicide and LeBron passing him, was led to that, because all of a sudden he's not significant, and maybe that's just how I think, or have been conditioned to think, because things like that have happened inside of our culture. And then it was, and we'll talk about that, like the emotional roller coaster of finding out what happened. It was the tragedy. It was his daughter died. It was other people had allegedly died inside of this. It was 5 people on the helicopter, then 9 people on the helicopter. So I think all of those things leaned into just the tragedy and the worldwide. Like, Kobe Bryant was a worldwide celebrity, not just a celebrity, but a basketball player that really did a lot for the game, not just in the United States, but worldwide. He was a superstar, you know, not just an American version of a superstar, but literally it was heard around the world. And so I think
there's 2 billboards up here in
Omaha,
little old Omaha.
Yeah. Since he passed. And so it's just crazy the reach that he had. And as I scrolled through all my social networks, like people I didn't even knew what basketball was were like mourning in different ways and stuff like that. So,
well, you kind of hit on it. So let's move into some of this reporting that happened around this story. And I mentioned it earlier about the TMZ culture, which if you're not sure what I'm talking about when I say that, it's more of just this this era we live in where news coverage wants to be first. They want to be fast, and they want to get the clicks, right? They want you to get to their website. They want the ads that they are serving up to you. You know, they want all those impressions of those ads because they're making money off of that. And they don't necessarily care how accurate it is. Sometimes it's as long as they're first.
Yeah.
And so when this happened, there were reports going all over the place. Like, I think one report said that Rick Fox was on there, and that people thought he had died. Another report came out that all of his daughters were on the helicopter. And it's even speculated that his own wife might have heard about his death through the TMZ report.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which is sad. And even to go along with that, I remember we were sitting talking about this on Monday, and Jonathan was like, the first place I got a notification from about Kobe Bryant dying was the Weather Channel.
Yeah,
you know, the Weather Channel app. And so I think it even goes into that whole, there is
which they're tying it into their own thing. Like, the weather could have been
the fog.
A problem for the helicopter or something.
So, which goes into that hard part of news is there's a monetary value that happens. And so if you have the Weather Channel app and you click that, there's ads and there's revenue, and it probably was the biggest revenue day that even the Weather Channel's had in a really long time about something that really wasn't a weather story. And so I think that's one of the hard parts as we get into it. And what is it doing to us? That's been like the biggest question I've been wondering personally of this culture and the emotional roller coaster, you know, which feels weird to say about like a celebrity I don't really have an actual connection to, but of feeling like other people died. I watched an interview with Rick Fox, who said he was getting calls from his parents literally, and like other people like mourning his death, which didn't actually happen, but just what would that feel like to like hear that your son died or somebody you loved, your best friend died via the news, or if Vanessa, his wife, did indeed like hear it from an app, you know, notification on her phone. Yeah. Man, I can't even imagine. So that's part of the hard thing for me. I'm wrestling through with the TMZ instant news, get it right versus, get it fast versus get it right culture. It's like a tabloidish kind of thing going on, but that's instant tabloids, which is dangerous. I feel like.
I think on an individual level, so we see that in the news, but on an individual level, we also struggle with that, because if you think like Twitter culture, I get all of my news from Twitter because it's where I'm going to get news first. Yeah. And I know that to be true. And so even if it's not accurate, like there's something within me that wants to be the first to know and wants to be the one that's telling other people. And so I think that when you say like what's happening within us, that makes me think of why do I want to be the first to know? Like, why does it not matter to me if it's accurate? Like, why do I want to be that one that's telling other people about it? There's an excitement that goes to that, I think. And I think that kind of plays into this whole idea of the tabloid culture of, you know, the media trying to be the first to tell you. It's because we want that information.
When I think like I'll see that even like in my own kids, like if one of them finds out something exciting or whatever it might be, they want to tell the other one before you do or anyone else. And I think that's just like part of humanity, right? Like we like to see that reaction. I mean, if it's good news, especially, it's like, oh, I want to be able to be the first to tell you this because I want to see your reaction and see how excited you are. But I think there's also that maybe a little bit darker side of like, I want to see your reaction no matter what. Like, even if it's sad news, I want to be the one who delivers this to you so I can see how you react, you know? And I think that kind of, this whole TMZ, you know, Twitter thing, it does tie into the thing that we just need to know. We need to be the first to know. We want to be the first one to share it with everyone on social media. You know, are we getting some sort of weird twisted pleasure out of this, or is it just something, you know, that just like a dopamine hit or an exciting thing that we do? It doesn't really make sense. I don't know. Or is it just part about being like about being part of a community where we're all together and we're sharing this information? I don't know. I'm sure there's positives and negatives.
Yeah, and I think to me one of the reasons to have this conversation isn't just because Kobe Bryant was a big hero or any of that kind of stuff, but for me it's been a discipleship journey this week as I've wondered through some of those questions, as we've had conversations about some of those questions of, I think to me, I think it's a big power struggle. Like I want when I know first and I'm the one that releases information, it's a craving for power to be like, I was the one that informed you. I'm the one that made you know that new thing. I text one of my buddies who I know is not on social media because I had a feeling he wouldn't have heard about it. And so there was like this empowering thing that I felt inside of me to be the one to let him know. And as I told my wife, and then there's this part of me of like, I have to let everybody know that I have a connection to Kobe. Like I've got to tweet out that I love listening to that song with my son, and because I need people to validate me. That's what I was kind of wondering. Am I looking for validation at the expense of what happened to Kobe? Am I looking for validation to let everybody know I know what's happening, and I knew it 37 seconds before you knew it? And so for me, the discipleship issue that's happening there is wrestling through some of those things.
Do you suppose it is because of things like TMZ and other news outlets putting almost a value on being first and fast, that it's almost kind of just through osmosis traveled into the zeitgeist of the culture, where we're just like, okay, we need to be first. It's how valuable I am. There's a value to me then because I was the one to inform you. I don't know. Is that something that you think we're influenced by, maybe even without realizing it?
I mean, I don't think it actually comes from TMZ. I don't think they're actually imposing this on us, because if you think about it, like in your own personal life, before there was even TMZ or hearing about other people, you just love like gossip, even in your own life, like hearing about other people, what's going on in other people's lives, and knowing what's the details of everything. And you don't even need to know, like it's stuff that you don't even need to know, but you're just like, I want to know what's going on. I want to know the little details, and so that you can feel informed. And so I think that TMZ is just kind of the expanded version of just building off of like our own like struggles, like our own sin struggles almost. Like they're like, yeah, we know humans want this. They want to hear the gossip. They want to know what's going on. Even if it's not helpful for the other person, it doesn't matter, because that's what they want and that's what we're going to give them. So I don't think it's them imposing it on us necessarily. I think they're just using our own sin struggles to kind of, make their business basically.
Has anybody like ever known something and you needed to let somebody know that but you can't tell them, that day? When like I've had moments where I'm like, hey, make sure you don't miss a meeting tomorrow because we're going to be talking about something pretty big.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you now because you need to hear it tomorrow, because you can't hear before people, but
I know.
But I know, and I want you to know that I know, and I want you to be there. And like I've done that, and I have to like reflect, and I've never reflected like this before, but I think that is like a sinful nature in me, wanting to power up and wanting people to know how awesome I am, and then let them know that in some way they're subservient to me because they don't know and I do know, and therefore I wield power. Right. And so I think there is like a sin discipleship component to this that I've never really considered until having some of these conversations, which is sad and also good, liberating too. So,
and I think even further to this, where we're talking about mourning celebrity deaths, I was kind of thinking on that. I'm like, why is it different than when someone, I mean, obviously when it's someone close to you, there's a personal close connection, but sometimes when a celebrity or someone in the public eye dies, it can almost feel the same. And like when I heard of Kobe's death, I was like, why do I feel a little sting here? Like, what is that? Like, why? I didn't know him. I haven't even, like I said earlier, I hadn't thought of him in 20 years. But the idea kind of struck me that it was like almost like when you smell something or you hear a song and you have this emotional reaction because there's this nostalgia that comes up, or it evokes some sort of memory or sentimentality. And I think that's part of the celebrity death mourning thing that happens is that, especially when it's someone from your youth, it's like, okay, are all my heroes dying? Like, is this an age of me? My relevancy is going away. Like, everything from my past, I'm losing my youth. So I think for some people that can be a reason that they start to grieve these deaths. I think other things can be like, if it's like cancer or suicide or something like that, like we've gone through that personally with someone we love, and it brings up those emotions. It brings up those feelings again, those things that maybe we haven't dealt with or we haven't healed from. Are there other examples of that? You think what is it that, is when someone dies that you don't know, but they're in the public eye? Why does it affect us so much?
I feel like this one affected me more specifically than any others have for some reason, and not necessarily because I'm like a huge fan of him, but just because like how it happened. I don't know, it just like brings that kind of in your face almost of like, you can't prevent death. Like it's anybody can die at any time. It doesn't matter. And like, I think to me that affected me more. It's like, oh my goodness, like it doesn't matter like who you are, like death is like inevitable. And so
doesn't matter what helicopter you have or if you have a great pilot,
right?
Like all these things that money can buy you to safeguard you.
Right. Anything. I mean, death is happening, for anyone. And so I think that was kind of hard. It was just like, oh my gosh, like, the whole kind of like, you never know if you're going to have tomorrow kind of thing. Yeah. It kind of hits you in the face.
And I think so many times we don't, I mean, unless you're really macabre and morbid, you're not thinking about death 24/7.
Right.
Yeah. So then all of a sudden when something like this happens, it just brings it to the forefront of your conscience, and you're just thinking like, oh, I'm mortal. And you have this like realization where you just kind of are starting to take an inventory of your life. What if this happened to me?
Yeah.
It's interesting because when you think of the loss of a celebrity, for us who are so, we're so far removed from this person, we're not feeling that day-to-day loss in our life, but that impact has still been made on us in some way or another, and so we're still grieving that. I think like a lot of the posts that are being done, not all of them are of course like, oh, I want people to know that I know, but I think sometimes people are grieving, and that's their way of just paying tribute to that online, is just to say like, this was something that impacted me in one way or another. I mean, I've heard stories this week of people talking about his marriage and just how long they've been together and the things that they've been through as a couple, and just looking up to them. But then also the girl dad hashtag that's been going on. I'm sure we can talk about that a little bit more, but just the impact that Kobe has had just in, supporting and encouraging his girls in their basketball and in everything that they're doing.
Yeah. And just being an example to other fathers of girls.
Yes. Right? Thank you.
Yeah. And I think there's a big, thing in an American culture. We've come a long way, but culture in general throughout history has been very patriarchal, and so there's been literally times in culture, and it happens in other places, where for your legacy to live on, you have to have a son, or that, there's been just terrible things that have happened where, girls, have been just discarded when they're born to families. Like we've read about it even in scripture, and we've seen it throughout history where they're just not valued because you can't have a legacy. You can't have your last name live on. And so there's,
I think what happens in China, where they they'll abort the girls if they're wanting a boy. Yeah.
So I think that's just been an underlying tone throughout history, and so things like that I think help move the needle forward. And Kobe was a champion for that. A lot of NBA players or males will not go to a female sport, and so like he was one of the biggest WNBA supporters, and he had girls that he hoped one day would play there and play at UConn, and so he was trying to champion that in a big way. And so I think it's been fun. I've got 3 daughters, to see a resurgence of pride in having a girl. One of the biggest gifts in my life, like my life changed forever. I had my son first, which was awesome, but I can't explain like that moment when I had my first daughter. Like just as a male, it changed me, forever, and gave me a different perspective. And so a lot of times that's something that's not talked about. Yeah. And so, so that's been a cool redemptive part of what's happened here. And I think the other part is, we didn't talk about impeachment or politics maybe for 5 minutes. Yeah. When something like this happens, we live in a very divided place. And right now, like the division is on steroids. And so there's almost like in the midst of mourning, a respite.
Yeah. It didn't matter what side you were on, people were coming together, and it's crazy to see like community form out of this, like all these fans of Kobe Bryant, and it's like we mentioned earlier, it's people that you didn't even think were fans, right? It's just like, oh, okay, this guy didn't even knew what basketball was, is a fan of Kobe Bryant. So
yeah. And I think, to get on a quick pastoral soapbox, I think one of the other things about anytime death happens, especially if it's unexpected, tragic, somebody that's got a lot going for them, a lot of life left, got all the money in the world, but any death, really, it's this thing rises up inside of us, and Rachel talked about that a little bit earlier, that this isn't the way things are supposed to be. Mm-hmm. This shouldn't have happened. And my grandparents have died of natural causes, and still being at that funeral, there's this feeling of this is not the way things are supposed to be, know? And I think it's this longing for Eden. It's this longing for, why do we feel this? And I think it's given to us by God. Yeah, that this isn't the way things were supposed to be. He didn't create a world where death was the ultimate end, and that we have a choice, that death doesn't have to define us or be the end of our lives, that there is this eternal thing inside of it. And so maybe not everybody's thinking that, the eternal perspective inside of it, but there is one that I think can be found, and I think it's that longing, that awareness, that awakening, that feeling that is inside of us, given to us by God, that we can't all identify, that this is not the way things are supposed to be. Yeah. And you're right. It's not how God created things, and there's hope inside of that. And so I think that's one side. And the other, side is sometimes we, as Christians, maybe jump on these things and then start to like give you're not promised tomorrow, and just jump into that and don't even empathize or grieve with people. Yeah. And so like at John 11, Jesus, I love seeing how he empathized with people, especially with Lazarus. He died, and Mary was just destroyed, and his sister Martha, and they just came to Jesus, and it's like the shortest verse in the Bible, where we just learn that Jesus wept. Like, before telling him, get your life right, or this is going to happen to you next, or hey, everyone, look at Lazarus, Jesus just empathized with people. Right. He lost someone he loved, and he had emotions in him, and he wept, and he was with them, and he was present with them in the midst of their grieving. Right. And I think we can learn from that.
And I think it's important, because it's like anytime someone tries to parlay a tragedy into a sales pitch, it just feels gross. And I think that includes Christianity. If you're going to try to parlay this into this big old sales pitch for, I think I've heard you call it fire insurance, that it just feels like you're selling short what salvation really is, if that's all it boils down to, is some sort of get out of hell free card, and that's what you're trying to do. It does feel bad. Yeah, so I think those are some of the positives of it, where you can see this, community forming. I think you can see people mourning together, celebrating his life, and hopefully it's a good example for people to draw together, to realize that, hey, we do have a lot in common. We can kind of put our petty differences aside and come together as a society for something good.
Yeah, and I think being present with people in those moments and relating to that actually is what opens the door to the gospel being shared, and there's good news to be shared. But being present with people, empathizing with people, just in any kind of tragedy, that's the actual way to share the gospel, because you're actually sharing it. You're living out the gospel in that, and then you have an open door. But if you just walk into somebody, and we had a whole episode on grief, a couple episodes on grief of moms that had lost their kids, that if you're wondering how to even talk to people in the middle of these kind of things, that we're just bad sometimes at grief, and knowing what to say, knowing how to respond, knowing how to react. Yeah. And so learning how to just be with people. Right. That your words matter, but your presence matters more.
Or sometimes I think people will think, well, they're a celebrity. You didn't even know them. Your grief's invalid. It's not, you shouldn't be grieving. But I think, people are going to react differently to this stuff. Maybe they're not necessarily grieving him specifically, but it's brought up some other feelings. It's brought up other things in their past and stuff like that. So yeah, just be sensitive to people.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. Anybody else have anything they want to add? Any final words before we wrap this up?
Nope.
No, I'm looking at you, Rachel McKenzie.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Thanks for not looking at me, jerk.
Yeah, you just been talking a bunch. It's fine.
Typical
I figured
Alex.
you were good.
Anyone but Alex. Do you have anything to
Yeah,
say?
anyone else? Anyone else? Austin's over there running the show, switching cameras and stuff. Maybe he has something to say.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I think that does it for this episode. But yeah, just be good to people. Love people, love God. Right? That's the message of today, I guess. If you guys have anything that you want to reach out to us with, you can send us an email at podcast@cccomaha.org, or you can reach out to us on social media at @cccomaha. We'd love to hear from you, any questions or concerns. But until next time, we'll talk to you then.